The global economy runs on oil, and for decades that lifeblood has flowed through a single narrow choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. But what happens when that choke point is suddenly slammed shut? What happens when the world's most critical energy artery becomes a war zone? Just days ago, the unthinkable happened. The Strait of Hormuz was closed. Not by an accident, not by a blockade, but by a nation drawing a line in the sand. And now the first bombs have fallen. The United States has launched a direct strike on the heart of Iran's oil empire. But here's the terrifying part. This wasn't the beginning of the war. This was a response, a signal that the conflict is already escalating far beyond what anyone in Washington predicted. This is the story of how a few square kilometers of Iranian desert have become the most dangerous piece of land on Earth, and how a single American video marked unclassified might be the spark that sets the entire Middle East ablaze. To understand why we're here, you have to look at a map. About 200 kilometers south of Tehran, in the turquoise waters of the Persian Gulf, sits Karg Island. It's not large, just 20 square kilometers of sand and industrial infrastructure. But don't let its size fool you. Karg Island is the lungs of Iran's economy. It's the terminal through which nearly 90% of the country's oil exports are breathed out to the world. Massive tankers dock here, loading up millions of barrels of crude to send to China, India, and beyond. For decades, it's been Iran's most valuable piece of infrastructure. And for decades, it's also been its most vulnerable. Military strategists have always known that if a conflict with Iran ever turned hot, Karg Island would be the first target. It's the fastest way to kneecap the Iranian economy without setting foot on Iranian soil. And last week, that theoretical threat became very, very real. The Pentagon released a video. It's grainy black and white, the kind of footage you'd expect from a targeting camera. In it, you can see the unmistakable silhouette of a B-2 Spirit bomber, the most advanced stealth bomber on the planet. These are not ordinary planes. They are flying fortresses, each one carrying a payload worth more than its weight in gold. They're designed to penetrate the most heavily defended airspace on Earth and destroy the most valuable targets. And on that day, their target was Karg Island. According to reports, the B-2s dropped nearly 90 bombs on the facility. The Pentagon's official statement was clinical. They had damaged defense-related infrastructure, a limited strike, a proportional response, a warning shot. But let's be clear about what this really was. This was America drawing a red line in the water. The message was unmistakable. We can destroy your ability to sell oil. We can do it with impunity. And this is just a taste of what's to come. But here's the problem with sending a message to a country like Iran. They don't just read it, they respond. And their response was immediate. It was calculated. And it was designed to escalate the conflict in a way that America never anticipated. While the world was focused on the smoke rising from Karg Island, a different kind of fire was being lit hundreds of kilometers to the south. In the United Arab Emirates, at the port of Fujairah, a massive oil depot erupted in flames. Drone strikes, likely launched from Iranian positions, had turned one of the region's largest storage facilities into an inferno. Now, at first glance, Fujairah might seem like an odd target. It's not a military base, it's not a nuclear facility, it's a storage depot. But the Iranians chose it for a very specific, very strategic reason. Remember the Strait of Hormuz? With that route closed, the UAE and its neighbors have one workaround: land routes. They can pump oil overland to ports on the Gulf of Oman, like Fujairah, and load it onto tankers there, bypassing the Iranian blockade entirely. Fujairah is the emergency exit. It's the backup plan. And by setting it on fire, Iran just locked the emergency exit door. The message from Tehran to the Gulf states is now terrifyingly clear. If we can't sell our oil, nobody sells their oil. If our economy is shut down, your ports will burn. But the Iranians aren't stopping there. They're now looking at an even bigger prize. A prize that, if captured, would send the global economy into a tailspin the likes of which we haven't seen since the Great Depression. We're talking about Bab el-Mandeb, the Strait of Tears. If the Strait of Hormuz is the world's energy eastern gateway, Bab el-Mandeb is its western anchor. It's a 20-mile wide choke point between Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula and Djibouti in Africa. Every year, thousands of ships pass through it, carrying oil from the Gulf and goods from Asia toward the Suez Canal and into Europe. It is quite simply one of the most important maritime passages on Earth, and Iran is now actively coordinating with its Houthi allies in Yemen to close it. Imagine the scenario for a moment. The Strait of Hormuz is already closed. Now imagine Bab el-Mandeb is closed too. The entire Arabian Peninsula becomes a fortress, cut off from the sea. Europe's energy supply is severed. Global shipping routes are paralyzed. The cost of everything, food, fuel, manufactured goods, skyrockets overnight. This isn't just a regional conflict anymore. This is a direct assault on the architecture of the global economy. And if Iran secedes, the world as we know it will change. This escalation creates a strategic nightmare for the United States. It's a problem of resources, of distance, and of attention. America's military, for all its power, cannot be everywhere at once, and the world is watching. They're waiting to see if the superpower stretches too thin. Consider what happened in Northeast Asia just days after the strike on Kharg Island. In a move that sent shivers through the Pentagon, North Korea launched 10 ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. The missiles flew over 3,000 kilometers, a clear test of range and capability. But the timing was everything. Just weeks earlier, the U.S. had redeployed key air defense systems from South Korea to Israel to protect its ally from potential Iranian retaliation. The move left a temporary gap in the defensive umbrella over the peninsula, and Kim Jong-un, ever the strategic opportunist, pounced. He didn't attack. He didn't need to. He simply flexed his muscles to demonstrate a fundamental truth. When America looks one way, its back is turned somewhere else. This is the cascading effect of the conflict. The war in the Middle East isn't just destabilizing the region, it's creating power vacuums and opportunities for adversaries across the globe. The U.S. is now facing the very real prospect of a two-front strategic crisis, one in the Gulf and one on the Korean Peninsula. But the most dangerous battle isn't being fought with bombs or missiles, it's being fought with currency. It's a war for the future of the global financial system. In 1974, the United States and Saudi Arabia struck a deal that would define the global economy for the next 50 years. In exchange for military protection, the Saudis agreed to price their oil exclusively in US dollars. This created the petrodollar system. Because every country in the world needed oil, and oil could only be bought with dollars. Every country in the world needed dollars. It created an insatiable permanent demand for American currency, propping up the US economy and funding its military dominance. That system is now under direct threat. China, the world's largest oil importer, has no interest in propping up the dollar. Russia, a massive oil producer, has been actively trying to ditch it for years. And now Iran and China have reportedly introduced a new condition for safe passage through the waters they control: payment in Chinese yuan, not US dollars. If this becomes the new normal, the consequences for the United States are catastrophic. If oil is no longer priced in dollars, the demand for dollars plummets, inflation soars, the ability of the US government to borrow money collapses. The petrodollar is the bedrock of American power, and Iran is now taking a sledgehammer to it. This is why the situation is so volatile. It's no longer about nuclear centrifuges or regional dominance. It's about survival. It's about two nations, the US and Iran, locked in a death spiral where neither can afford to back down, and both are convinced the other will blink first. The US believed a show of force at Kharg Island would force Iran to reopen the strait. Instead, Iran doubled down, setting fire to Fujairah and threatening Bab el-Mandeb. Iran believed closing the strait would force the U.S. to the negotiating table. Instead, the U.S. responded with stealth bombers. Each side's solution is making the problem worse. And with every escalation, the chances of a miscalculation, a stray missile that sinks a tanker, a drone strike that hits the wrong target, a false alarm that triggers full-scale retaliation, increase exponentially. So where do we go from here? What does the endgame look like? There are three possible futures. The first is a grinding, low-intensity war of attrition. The strait remains closed. Tankers are stuck. Iran uses drones and proxy forces to harass shipping and strike at Gulf infrastructure. The U.S. responds with more airstrikes. Global oil prices remain sky high, crippling the world economy. It's a slow bleed for everyone involved. The second scenario is a full-scale invasion. The U.S., unable to reopen the strait through air power alone, is forced to consider a ground operation to seize and secure Iranian launch sites along the coast. This would be a nightmare. It would mean occupying Iranian territory, getting bogged down in a guerrilla war, and facing the same quagmire that has haunted great powers for decades. The third, and perhaps most terrifying scenario, is the collapse of the petrodollar. If Iran successfully shifts oil trade away from the dollar, and if China and Russia back this new system, the economic shockwave could be worse than any bomb. It would trigger a financial crisis in the United States that would dwarf 2008. It would be a bloodless defeat, but a defeat nonetheless. The bombs that fell on Kharg Island were meant to be a message. They were meant to restore deterrence, to show strength, to force a recalculation in Tehran. Instead, they may have done the opposite. They've proven to Iran that its most valuable asset is also its most vulnerable. They've pushed Tehran to act on its threats. And they've ignited a conflict that is no longer just about oil or territory, but about the very future of the global order. The fire on Kharg Island has been put out, but the fires it ignited in Fujairah, in Bab el-Mandeb, in the halls of financial power, are just beginning to burn. This is not a war that will be won with bombs. It will be won or lost on the world's oceans, in its financial markets, and in the minds of leaders trying to figure out how to step back from a brink that keeps getting closer and closer. This is Daily Report. Please let us know in the comments whether you found today's video informative or not. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to smash the bell icon so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Take good care of yourselves, and thank you for watching.